Hey y'all, podcasting director Chris Mosier here with another live pod. Former Illinois Congressman Adam Kinzinger has become an influential player in Texas politics since moving his family to the Houston area after leaving the U.S. House in 2022. His vocal rejection of Donald Trump and the MAGA movement, including his active involvement in Trump's second impeachment, has brought him into natural alliance with progressives across the country. Congressman Kinzinger took part in a forum with several recent Democratic winners of North Texas elections organized by the Dallas County Democratic Party and held at Northaven United Methodist Church on June 17th. And this podcast contains his remarks as well as an interview conducted by Congressman Kinzinger's fellow anti-Trump Republican and military veteran Michael Wood, in which the two explore the history and current nature of the MAGA movement and strategies on how the rest of America should go about resisting it. The first voice you'll hear here is Dallas Democratic Precinct Chair and event organizer Pat Hicks. Enjoy.
I know as Adam speaks around the country, he gets this question over and over because I've heard him say so. What can we do? What can I do? And I really think you already have the answer to that question because you're here. You showed up. Not to this, but to yourself. You took action. I know that some of you drove hundreds of miles to show up. And some of you who have never been to an event like this before in your lives drove across town, but you showed up. That takes courage. And that's the answer to the question. Show up. Just show up any way you can, every little way that you can, show up. Because the more you do show up, the more you will show up. Thank you for coming. Ladies and gentlemen, Congressman Adam Kinzinger.
What's up? What's up? Hi, choir. Hey, guys. Listen. First off, the choir is going to sing for us later, right? You guys better get this together because we're expecting it. We need some robes out here, though. Thank you all for being here. And just so you guys know, this was put on, but this is all volunteer driven. So nobody's being paid for this, right? Nobody's being paid. You guys are all volunteer because you care about it. And all of you here care. And so I want to just say thank you for that. The question is, why am I here? I don't know. So let's go on. So I don't know if you guys know this. I'm now a Texas resident. I live in the Woodlands. So just like just like about 20% of the rest of Illinois is now Texas residents as well. How many of you guys originate from Illinois in here? All right, yeah, exactly. If you go up to Illinois and you're like, how many of you guys originate from Texas? You're not going to see that many of them. But anyway, no, listen, this is a really important moment. This is the only time I'm going to ask you to show hands, but how many of you guys feel sometimes a little disheartened, a little worn out, right? We all feel that way. And now one of the things we're up against in this kind of battle for democracy is that those that are anti-democratic, that want a more authoritarian government, they get energized by chaos. And so every time there's chaos, this is what they love. It's like a hit of energy to them, like a 5-hour energy drink. People like you and I, we get exhausted by chaos. We get worn out. We want to give up, right? And this is why one of the things I want to tell you first is take that burden you're carrying on your shoulder, that you got to put out that one more tweet or you got to do whatever, drop that burden. Take a big deep breath and smile because we are all in this together. This isn't riding, the future of the United States of America is not riding on your shoulders alone. It's riding on all of our shoulders together. You know that saying, it's like many hands make light work, right? That's what we're dealing with now. All of us together. If we look around this room, you're going to see people from all over the state of Texas. You're going to see people from all over the area in Dallas. But more importantly, you're going to see people all over the political spectrum. And what we're dealing with now is not a battle that's right against left. This is a battle, as I said, at the Democratic National Convention. This is the uneasy sometimes coalition of the few on the sane right, the center and the left, to defend our democracy against those that would tear it asunder. And I got to tell you guys, to me, as a kid that got involved in politics when I was 6 years old, kind of weird, I know, but as somebody that did that, This is the kind of thing that excites me, that energizes me. Watching people from all different backgrounds, all different thoughts come together and say, we want to defend our system of government. Think about this. Next year, we're celebrating the 250th anniversary of our democracy, a quarter of a millennium, right? All through 250 years, from the Revolution to conflicts in between, to the Civil War, to World War I, to World War II, to Korea, to Vietnam, to Desert Storm, to the post-9/11 generation. All these generations have been called upon to defend our country in some way. And in some cases, that meant putting your life on the line for the country. We have to have 18, 19, 20-year-olds that are willing, as sad as it is, they're willing to put their life on the line for our nation. All of that sacrifice, all of those moments lead to this exact moment right here on, ironically, the 250th anniversary of our democracy. Every generation has made sacrifices. This is our fight now. This whole fight to defend our democracy has landed on our generation. And the question is are we going to leave our kids a country better off than we inherited? Or are we going to be the generation where democracy dies? And I've got to tell you from my answer, and I'm sure all of your answer, I refuse to be the generation that lets democracy die on our watch. My grandfather stared down the Nazis in World War II, and we'll stare them down here at home if we have to. But that's what's at stake. I want to give you a really quick story, then I want to finish up with why I'm here. So I wear on my wrist the name of Captain Andreas O'Keefe. As Mike will tell you, he knows people that gave their life in the line of service as well. One of the things, so people ask me all the time, like, what made you different on the January 6th stuff versus every other Republican? And I don't know the answer to that, because to me it was really easy. You just do the right thing. But one of the things that I made a realization, I made a commitment when I ran the very first time in 2010, is I said, I'd just gotten back from Iraq. And I said, if I'm going to be in a position as a member of Congress to vote to supply people for war, to send people for war, I'm going to be in a position to ask people to give their life on behalf of the country. I have to be willing to give up my career for the same cause. How in the world can you ask an 18, 19, 20-year-old to go be willing to die for the country, but you are unwilling to sacrifice your $174,000 a year job because you can't imagine living without the title congressman, and you want your friends and the cocktail parties and everything else? People that salute the caskets of young men and women that come home that are unwilling to take votes to defend their country are totally incompetent and totally unworthy of the office they own.
Is this working? All right. Can you guys hear me?
Hey, by the way, to the choir, I know you guys can't see us. I'm sorry. Can you hear us? That's good. All right.
Okay. All right. So let me know if you can't hear me. I've never had one of these Taylor Swift mics before.
I say it's like a mega church pastor.
It's so we're about to change gears a little bit and go up to 30,000 feet. But before we do, I just want to say that this local stuff matters so much. I've got 4 kids. I've got 4 daughters. They're all at Keller ISD. And I got to say that, actually, one of them is just dipping her toes into politics. She's 15 years old. She's scared to death I'm going to embarrass her. She's right over there. That's Madeline right there.
You would never embarrass her, though. Never.
But this stuff that happens at the local level is so important, and we really saw that in Keller with that horrible scheme to split the district and sort of do whatever they were going to do. And we're like I said, we're about to go national. I will say that for nationally, I think a lot of what's going to help out the Democrats going forward is going to be health care. Now, whenever it comes to Texas, I really think the Republicans have overstepped with these vouchers. I really think that's going to be an Achilles heel. And I think we need to start hammering them, because I got to say, even in Keller, we're seeing bigger classes, we're seeing teachers getting laid off, we're seeing teachers taking other lines of work, because that money that should be going to those classrooms is going to Greg Abbott's voucher scheme, and that's got to be stopped. All right, so that being said, let's go national. I've got a military background, you've got a military background, so Congressman, what is MAGA? Because the first thing we try to do in the military is just define the enemy, and we all say MAGA, MAGA, MAGA. Now, a whole lot of Democrats would probably say, they're the same thing as, Newt Gingrich in 1994. They're the same thing as George W. Bush. But they're different, right?
Yeah,
and how are they different? And what did you see in Congress up close?
Well, first off, again, I want to brag on him for one quick second. I don't know if you guys know his story. He still serves in the Marines as a lieutenant colonel in the reserves. Obviously served in Afghanistan, but I got to know him because what year did you run? What was it?
2021 is right after January.
Yeah, right after January 6th. I hear about this primary in a district near here, and I hear about this candidate running that is unabashedly standing up to Donald Trump. And you know how rare that is in the GOP, right? I saw a debate where he's standing in front of the audience and saying, "No, I'm not getting on board with Donald Trump. January 6th was wrong." And I said, I've got to get involved with him. I got to call him, and whether he wins or loses, what matters is we have to stand with people that are willing to tell the truth. And so I've admired his courage ever since. The benefit of being out and looking in is I can see trends that started that I didn't necessarily see when I was in. But I'll tell you, when I was elected, I came in 2010 in the big Tea Party wave. In 2010, I would say that the Tea Party was really just a bunch of ticked off Republicans. And then after 2010, they kind of went home, and then there was this grifting class that continued to carry the moniker of Tea Party that ended up becoming even more crazy. And before I was even sworn in, so between when I was elected and sworn in, I was already at war with these folks. And so my time in Congress was kind of defined politically as taking on the far right basically the entire time. And unfortunately, that's a fight we lost. But one of the things I would see is, look, it's one thing to say, because I talk to Democrats all the time, they're like, well, how could you have, and can't you have seen that? And I'm like, no, because it is not the same thing as Michael was saying. MAGA became, and it was both Donald Trump caused and Donald Trump is a symptom of it. It's kind of both. They feed off each other. But it became a nationalistic movement. It became an overtly racist movement, to be honest. It became, Republicans, including those that we would consider on the right, used to support comprehensive immigration reform. There was always a small group that killed it in the GOP, but 80% did. That's not the case anymore. And so what you actually saw was, in many cases, principled conservatives that either left or acquiesced, but they acquiesced to become MAGA, which is completely unrecognizable. And I would say when Republicans today call themselves conservatives, I shudder because there's nothing conservative about today's GOP. Today's GOP is far from it. And so I will just quickly say the roots of MAGA, I think, come from, this strain that's always kind of been there, of course, this nationalistic strain that we can look in history and see. As George W. Bush once said, he goes, it's the isms that creep their head up, the nationalism, racism, whatever. And but it also was fed by people, frankly, in the Midwest, where I'm from, and everywhere else in Texas, that felt like the coasts weren't paying attention to them. And they felt really alone. And I got to tell you, one of my biggest concerns is men who felt very isolated. And one of my biggest concerns, and I want to pitch this to you guys because I think it's important, is today's youth, particularly young men, have got to see a better example of masculinity from men. And I'm going to criticize the left for a second, and then I'm going to spend the rest of my time criticizing the right. But I feel like for a long time, there was this movement to call everything that was masculine toxic. And so what would happen? So masculinity, I think, is good, by the way. And these young men that felt like masculine, like, I have these internal desires to fight or to whatever. They were told all masculinity is toxic. So all of a sudden they feel like they don't have a home, they don't have a place, they don't understand themselves. And in the absence of a true definition of masculinity, which I would say is punching up, not down, it's defending the defenseless, it's fighting for something, not fighting against people that can't defend themselves. And in the absence of that definition, Donald Trump comes along, Andrew Tate comes along, certain podcasts come along, and they say masculinity is tweeting in all caps, it's never showing emotion, it's being degrading to women, and then, by the way, what woman would ever go with a guy that's degrading to her? And so that feeds the cycle where then guys feel isolated from women, and it feeds that anger. It is on us, men in this room and men all over the country, to be an example of healthy masculinity to the young male generation. It's not on women, it's not on the Democrats, it's on us, and I think that's our challenge.
So, yeah, this is something I'm trying to sort of work through and find words for. I think, I'm 38 years old. All of my life and before that, sort of the main dividing line in American politics has been between sort of big government or small government. I mean, we're all sophisticated here. We understand that, it's very complicated, but if we're just speaking broadly, that's sort of what it's been. But I think something about 10 years ago started to change, and the real division is between liberals and reactionary. Now, by liberals, I don't necessarily mean left-wing or anything like that. I mean classical liberals, those who believe in an open society, a democratic society, a free society, and then others who are, they for whatever reason, they feel threatened by that, or they're against it for whatever reason, whether that be on trade or lifestyle choices or anything like that. And I think that classical liberal whatever versus reactionary divide is the real thing that we're going to have probably for the rest of our lives. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sort of how we need to start thinking about politics and whenever we're making coalitions and whatnot.
I agree.
Now, you mentioned the Midwest, and I think it's probably clear from everybody here from that sermon that you gave at the beginning that you come from a church background, an evangelical background, right? Mm-hmm. What role has religion played in the rise of MAGA? Because it's there, right?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question, and it's one that I've struggled with a lot, okay? I still am a Christian, and actually, I'll tell you the good thing for me personally about this, not for the country, but for me personally, is it's forced me to, I hate the term because it's overused, but deconstruct my faith and figure out what I really believe, right? And it's actually made my faith stronger, because I've learned who Jesus really is. I've learned what he really teaches. And one of the things that I've learned he teaches, and it's actually one of the things he, in his words, talks about the most, is to not fear, right? What is it that feeds the narrative of MAGA, of the right? What is it that feeds them? It's fear. Everything is fear. They're fearful of their neighbors. They're fearful of immigration. They're fearful that they're going to lose control. They're fearful that the country they remember is going to go away, even though the country they remember never existed. They're fearful that their kids are going to go away. They're fearful that they're going to lose their family. They're fearful they're going to run out of money and never have a job. And I understand that some fear is legitimate, but the problem is a leader's job is to come along and say, I understand your fear. Let me give you a vision for a way out of that fear. Leaders generally through our history have understood you can play with fear a little bit, you can kind of control the fire, but ultimately your job is to rein that fire in. And unfortunately, we have a president now that stokes that fire, stokes that division. I think he's angrier about the about Democrats than he is the Iranian nuclear program. I think he's more angry about the left than he is about what China's doing. So what am I saying? He's turning us against each other as enemies. So what role has the church played in this? The problem with the church, and my pastor right now is somebody that sees, he actually just moved up here to the Dallas Theological Seminary. Actually, he's a teacher. But So there's a lot of preachers that are now getting it and understanding the big picture and understanding that, Jesus didn't talk about getting involved in government. In fact, he said the opposite. It doesn't mean you can't be a person of faith in government, but it means your government is not there for your faith. And to be, like people can have different views than you, and your job is to represent them equally. And unfortunately, when we look at the prophecies that you hear about sometimes in evangelicalism or sometimes among the more charismatic, you have, these con artists that pretend to be prophets that always give these prophecies about how God has told them that Donald Trump is the man. And unfortunately, they've started to believe it. They've started to believe their own press. And what I think is sad is I will often say to a fellow Christian that may argue with me on this issue, is I said, do you think a young person is more likely to turn to the church in 2015 or today? And we all know it's 2015 because today the vision of the church is not a place where you can go to be accepted. It's not a place where you can go to find friends and to let your guard down and to not be divisive. In fact, they see this as a catalyst of division. And so my call has always been to the church is find your real meaning again. And I think, and I do believe that we are on the precipice of that happening. Obviously, this church, by hosting you, is one of the good churches. And so I would, in the bottom line, I would say, unfortunately, if the devil is real, and I believe he is, he's done a really good job of discrediting the church through this.
It's been hard to see. I'm a Christian as well, and it's been real, because really, if you go back to like 2015 or 2016, it really was, again, the Christian right might not be your cup of tea, but a lot of those guys really did. It seemed like they had something beyond just Donald Trump that they believed in, and a lot of them, not all of them, but a lot of them really did hold out longer. And it seems like all of those dominoes have just fallen, and
Paula White is Donald Trump's spiritual advisor. She's the prophet grift I was talking about, right?
And it's been really hard to see all these people who have warned us about golden calves, just fall all over idolatry for this game show host, this orange game show host. So
a guy who, by the way, cakes on makeup, blings himself out. Never served in the military. It's fine if he didn't. He dodged the draft and acts like they put out a picture of him in his cadet uniform when he was in military school as, for the parade, like somehow that was service to this country. He is the least alpha male in this country, by the way.
And it's a real warning sign about what happens whenever you just sort of play footsie with evil.
Yeah,
because it turned into, we're just going to use him. He's just sort of a means to an end. And then over 10 years, they couldn't keep that straight in their head, and now they're more MAGA, a lot of them, than they are Christian.
Can I use a quick example on that? And this is also a warning to Democrats, whatever your version of MAGA is, if it's there yet or if it comes, is when kind of this extreme element came along, in the party, the idea was, by our leadership, is we're going to embrace them, and then we're going to change them. We're going to bring them into the team and use them. It's cancer. At no point has any doctor, you're a doctor, if somebody has cancer, do you encourage them to surround the cancer tissue with healthy tissue? What ends up happening? That cancerous tissue ends up spreading throughout the body instead of the healthy tissue overtaking the cancer. And that's exactly what happened in the GOP.
So let's talk about what Democrats or the pro-democracy coalition can do to win going forward. Because I got to say, I was in a very dark spot, very dark place last November. All right, so losing the popular vote to this guy who tried a coup, and then losing every swing state as well. I mean, that was a body blow. That was more than just losing an election. That was, what country am I living in right now? So what do Democrats need to do to win? Because I think just sort of staying at 46% and then hoping that the news cycle is going to go your way in November every 2 years isn't good enough. And I got to say, even here in Texas, Democrats haven't won statewide since 1994.
Wow.
And I'm scared to death that Ken Paxton is going to be a United States Senator. All right? So we need to start. Exactly. So what are the weak points of MAGA? What can Democrats do to win, to strengthen their political position going into 2026 and also 2028?
So the weak points of MAGA, first off, if we end up, which I actually support, but if we end up, I just wish we had a different team doing it. If we end up taking out Iran's nuclear program, that's going to really divide MAGA right there. I just heard on the way here that Tulsi Gabbard has threatened to resign if he does. I'm joking to the press, but listen, it's almost worth bombing Iran right there. Not really. Anyway. So that, I mean, look, this is a coalition that doesn't agree on anything, okay? So the tendency is for that to naturally divide as it is. The other weak point is this, and this is why I have to catch myself when I talk about Trump as a scary authoritarian, because we're feeding into his narrative. His narrative is he's big and scary, and his people love that because he's scaring you, their enemy. The reality of it is, I think the weak point of MAGA is to point out the weakness of the man. You know how I just called him, he's the opposite of an alpha male? I think it's true, right? This is a guy that is all about visuals. He's all about a presentation. And so he presents this view of manliness when in reality, he's scared to death. I mean, he really is. I'd feel bad for him if he wasn't destroying the country. He's an 8-year-old boy trembling in his boots, trying to win his father's approval, who he can never win because his father passed a long time ago. It's psychologically sad, but he's taken the country with him. And I think it's important for us to point that out repeatedly to MAGA, that he is a weak person. And I think when he's done, whatever that looks like, I don't think there's anybody that can actually inherit his legacy, because I think he's uniquely capable. Now, what is it that Democrats need to do? Now, this is just my humble suggestion. First off, you need to put up candidates that actually reflect the area, okay? I think the Democrats are much better at this, by the way. You should not be running an extremely liberal person in Texas, probably, right? For statewide. It doesn't mean you don't vote for the person or you don't like them, but the best thing you can do is run probably a moderate Democrat in Texas for the Senate. That's the way that you can win, because believe it or not, there still is a group of people in the middle that are not Democrats, they're not Republicans, they may be low information voters, they may not like either party, but if you put up candidates that reflect the districts, and then you can have all your divisions in the party, that's okay. We have two parties that represent 300 million people. You're going to have divisions in a party. That's fine, but that's democracy. The other thing I would say is this. The two big areas. I was speaking to the laborers up in Missouri. It was a big national labor convention. I was always a pro-union Republican, and you know, one of the things is these. Thank you. You know, organized labor has been turning against Democrats of late. The leadership has kind of held the line, but the membership has gone from typically 60% Republican to now 60% Democrat to now 55% Republican. Part of it is the cultural issues, things like guns, right? That's a lot of them will talk about gun issues. So, but the other thing is, I think Democrats have got to do a better job of speaking again to the working class. And it's about, look, Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, was standing on a stage at CPAC with a chainsaw giggling because he's taking away stuff that you guys need, that we all need. He doesn't need anything because he's worth $500 billion, which he got, by the way, from the government, giving him seed money for all of his projects. This is the most corrupt administration to ever be in charge of the United States of America, and I hope there is never a more corrupt president, because that would be out of control than this guy. And those are the kinds of messages when you talk to the working class and you say, like, look, they are sucking you dry. They are stealing your money. They're taking your wealth. Trump's meme coin, 16, 20 people, something like that, actually made money. 16,000 people lost money on it. Who do you think lost money? The people that didn't have it to lose in the first place. And so I think those kinds of messages, getting away from the identity politics and talking again about economics issues, as Mike mentioned, about health care, about the fact that you should make a living wage for hard work, those are the kinds of things. It's going to take time. It's not necessarily going to happen in 2026. You can't put Tim Waltz out, on a couple of ads and say, why did we lose men? Because it's going to take a long amount of time to win them back. But I think that would be the recommendations I would make.
So everybody in Texas used to be a Democrat, all right?
Yeah.
Everybody,
Yeah.
and obviously I used to be a Republican. I've repented. But my grandmother, I was born and raised in Midland, Texas, out in West Texas, and I live in Fort Worth now. My grandmother, was born in Laredo, raised in San Antonio, and then lived in Midland. She was a yellow dog Democrat, all right? I don't think she ever had any other president in her life aside from FDR. Like, everybody was just sitting in FDR's seat. And I think about what politics used to be back then, and she was in the same political party, very happy to be in the same political party as people in Massachusetts who were maybe a little bit more left-wing than my grandmother was. And I think Democrats can learn something about that today. I think actually Democrats today are thinking too small about just getting to 51%. Mm-hmm. I think this country needs, not just the Democratic Party, I think this country needs a party that can get up to 60%. And I think the Democratic Party can do that. Yep. I think it can go back to the days of LBJ in the Texas wing and JFK in the Massachusetts wing. And they disagree on things, but they agree on the big thing, which is keeping this a free country. Mm-hmm. And they, yeah, exactly. And they debate, they argue, they negotiate behind closed doors, but then they slap the table and they govern the country. Now, speaking of governing the country, how do you think the midterms are going to go? And if you're a Republican congressman right now in the House, maybe you're in a competitive district, what are you worried about?
It's a great question. Look, by the way, I'm going to echo everything you said about the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party feels defeated right now. I get it. I think it is the party of the future because it's a party that naturally was built on a lot more coalitions than the Republican Party was. You've kind of learned how to manage differences, like people that have different interests and come together. So I think naturally the kind of muscle memory is there to do that, more so than the Republican Party, which is, guys, honestly, it's a cult now. And I could go into the dynamics of it, but it truly is a cult. All cults fail, by the way, so that's the good news. But I see the fight we're in right now as he's a ground pounder, I'm an air guy, but like if we're in a trench and I see an enemy that's 5 meters away and 30 meters away, I'm going to tell my guys, well, he's the ground pounder. He'll tell his guys, let's put everything on the 5-meter target to make sure we neutralize that before we care about the guy 35 meters away. Now, why am I using a war analogy? Because the 5-meter target is the threat to our democracy. And that is the thing that we have to defend against. And then once that threat is defeated, then we can have the luxury of disagreeing on issues again. That's fun, actually. I like disagreeing on issues. So if I'm a Republican member of the House right now, the thing I'm the most scared of is, frankly, the fracturing MAGA coalition that could happen at any time. But really, it's this big, beautiful bill. When I got elected, we were all against these big bills, right? Remember, we were all like, you're single subject bills, and the Democrats threw this big 1,000-page bill that they didn't read. Well, now they just did a 50 gajillion-page bill that nobody read, and that is going to come back to bite them. The Medicaid cuts are going to come back to bite them. I think the fact that they are arrogantly saying things like, my responsibility is to do what Donald Trump says. There was a Texas congressman that said this. If Donald Trump says jump, we say how high. That is my North Star and not your constituents. Eventually that's going to wear thin. And I think that's the things that they're afraid of. I do think that the Republicans probably lose the House in 26, but it's not automatic. And they could super lose the House if the Democrats come up with a coherent message. Let me say one more critical thing to the Democrats. Start fighting, okay? Start fighting. The former Republicans are the ones that I think are effective at executing this fight because we know what we're up against. And at the time between when Donald Trump was reelected and when he was sworn in, we were screaming like, guys, get ready. You're going to be hit with an avalanche. And I feel like the leadership didn't. And all of a sudden, when they were hit with the avalanche, they were unprepared. And what did they do? The House of Representatives went home for 2 weeks while Doge was being created and it was gutting government. That's unacceptable. The other thing, they need to be saying things to, for instance, I don't know, Qatar. If you try to bribe our government, you can maybe get away with it for 3.5 years, but when we take over, there will be penalties for that. If you're housing American citizens or you're housing people without due process in your country, there will be hell to pay when Democrats take over. And that's how you create a message, and that's how you tell the American people what you're for.
Yeah, and I will say that, listen, I talked earlier about how it seems like American politics is shifting and sort of the paradigm is changing. You know, I will say that, like, if you support trade, if you support NATO, if you support standing up to Russian aggression, if you support, vaccines, if you support not exploding the debt, you got to be a Democrat now. And I think that it's not majority of the party by any means, but I do think there's about 15 to 20% of the GOP that's open to that argument.
I agree.
In places like Texas. And if you can just get the right kind of candidates and the right kind of message, I think you can really do some good things for the country in these elections going forward. All right. I don't know. We're going to get questions from the audience, right?
Yes.
Okay. So just one more before we go over to the audience. I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you want to make any news here tonight? What's
Nah, no news tonight. No, look, I don't know. I have loved, I've really enjoyed, I have down days like all of you, don't worry. But I've loved kind of working to build this coalition. I'm going to spend the next couple of years making sure good, democracy-loving people are elected. Obviously, I have my media stuff I'm doing, and after that, I'm going to analyze and see, what people that are running in 2028, who are they representing, what do they look like, and not eager to do anything like that, but I wouldn't rule it out.
All right, sounds good.
Well, I think it's time that we hear from you. So, Jody, would you like to?
Good evening, and thanks again for everybody attending. Hopefully it's been really enjoyable for everyone, and I want to thank all of our panelists, Adam Bazaldua, Michael Wood, of course, Congressman Kinzinger. I want to make sure everyone notices I saw that Chairman Cardell Coleman, who's the head of the Dallas County Democratic Party, is here with us tonight, so I want to recognize him. All of you sitting up here tonight are ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Every one of you here tonight is also an ordinary person, and every one of you can do extraordinary things. It just takes stepping up and picking one thing to do. And if everyone in here did one thing, we could make incredible changes. We're going to have Michael Wood read some audience questions that we've pulled, but I'm going to kick off the first one for Congressman. So besides the stress of raising a young child, I remember those days.
He's crazy.
I'm wondering what keeps you up at night, because I can tell you I've had a lot of sleepless nights, and I'm guessing many of you, particularly in the last few days alone, have had a lot of sleepless nights. So if you could share with us.
Yeah, look, and by the way, I forgot to mention, I want to say to our law enforcement officers here, thank you guys for your service and being here. Unfortunately, when I do public events, we have to have them, but I appreciate them coming and spending their time to make sure that everybody here is safe. Listen, the things that keep me up at night, first off, I'm going to say this, I want to be very clear. The threats that come in, they don't keep me up at night. They really don't. I think people that make death threats are actually really weak, and they're compensating for something. What does keep me up at night is a couple of things. Number one, I'm worried that Ukraine loses, even though they're winning right now. They are absolutely crushing Russia in the war. But I worry that if they lose, that's going to change the whole post-World War II order of the world. And the other thing I think that really keeps me up at night is the role of the military. I'm going to tell you one of the darkest days I had this week, and Michael and I talked about it, was watching, unfortunately, members of the military cheering and booing and jeering behind the President of the United States. And in all honesty, it's not their fault, it's leaders' fault for not having briefed them, not reminding them. It's tough when the president's right there, you know. I worry that we lose the bipartisan faith of the military. And Donald Trump is doing his best to do that with the deployments to LA and things like that. The military is literally the last institution in government that shares bipartisan support. And I had to tell you, when I'm sitting in my office on January 6th with my gun on my desk, entertaining the fact that I may have to defend myself in my office, the one thing I knew is no matter how bad it got, at least there was always the hopefully unnecessary backstop of the U.S. military. And I would hate to think that that becomes a partisan thing. So I think those are probably the two biggest things to keep me up.
Michael, I'm going to give you some questions. I don't know if we have time for all of them, but
I'll try to keep them short so we get to more of them.
Okay, so how would you recommend we resist peacefully the current administration while mobilizing in a positive direction?
I think what's happening is amazing, honestly. The No Kings protests were fantastic. You guys all know the stat by now, but what is it, 3.5% of a country? If it mobilizes, it usually leads to a change. Don't expect, first off, nothing. We're not going to get rid of Donald Trump in the next 3.5 years, right? Except that, we're going to go through elections. There will be an election in 3.5 years. I believe that. But what is important is that we, in doing these protests and forcing town halls, by the way, keep forcing your member of Congress to do a town hall or shaming them if they don't. I hated doing them for that very reason. So put on that pressure. But it sends a message to these folks that they are not accountable to Donald Trump, they're accountable to you. And all of a sudden, the calculation changes between I fear my base in Donald Trump to I fear my constituents. So that's why these are so important. And I would say in that, be very vigilant of the image you're putting out, right? This is not about carrying whatever flag because it makes you feel good. This is about sending a message that wins the American people over to your side. So whatever that looks like, which I think they actually did pretty well this weekend with few exceptions. And I think I think keep doing that and look at the progress we've made in just 6 months and understand that's actually going faster than the Tea Party came into being in 2010.
So this is a question about Congress as an institution, and something that I'm pretty passionate about. It seems like, in a lot of ways, we don't really have a Congress. All right, so it seems like, I went to the No Kings protest, and it was the right thing to call it because we have a guy who thinks that all power is in his hands, and that he can set tax policy through tariffs, that he can, decide what money gets spent here and there, all things that are supposed to be under Congress. So this person wants to know, why do you think Congress has abdicated its power to check the executive? Because, we at the beginning of the country, Federalist, ambition would check ambition. The branches would watch each other. Right now, it seems like Congress is just rolling over.
Part of it is the primaries, right? Our primary process, redistricting issues, right? Everybody's only accountable within your own party. So it becomes a race within the party to the extreme because then you can raise more money and then you get better and then Fox News is there to feed that narrative. I think that's part of it. And we're electing now actors. We're not electing serious legislators. We're electing people that No, I mean, look, you can be instantly famous now if you want, because all you have to do is say some crazy S word. We're in church, sorry, Jesus. Some crazy stuff, and you immediately have 100% name recognition. Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? That's the example. And so I think it became easier for folks to just abdicate their responsibility and turn to entertaining and carrying the title and being part of the tribe than it did to doing the hard work. And that's why I actually think the next president of the United States has got to spend the first couple years probably clawing back all the bad stuff that was done by Trump, and then the rest of his or her term actually putting into place real guardrails that hold. And that includes empowering Congress to actually do their job again, which they, right now, we're basically the Roman Empire at that.
So, by the way, on this, just real talk, like, if you're a congressman, it's really easy to be lazy, right? That can be a really easy job, right? You just leadership says vote this way, and you just do that, and then you spend the rest of your time.
Yeah, and you get to go on vacation. You drink a lot. You go on vacation every 3 weeks, right? It could be a really easy job if you don't care.
Yeah. All right. So, next question. You talked about this earlier whenever we were talking. This is about winning young male voters. So, how can Democrats change their message to be more effective to these guys? Because I've got guys in my family. Yeah. They're union pipe fitters up in Missouri, and lifelong Democrats. And who knows what will change, but they will never vote for a Democrat again. Yep. And that's a problem, because that should be the base of the Democrats.
You know, I don't have the golden answer, except to say we need to go back. You know, my whole discussion about masculinity, instead of eschewing it, we need to embrace it, but a healthy masculinity, right? Like, that's okay, it's good. Like, men can be men, right? I mean, I'm going to tell you, one of the things veterans struggle with when they come back, yes, it's the war, it's things like that, but I think also, as a young man, when you go to war, you feel like you're at your maximum, like, engagement of, you as a man, and then all of a sudden you come home, and, what's the scene in Hurt Locker, where all of a sudden he's in or maybe it was American Sniper, where all of a sudden he's in a grocery store looking and picking cereal. And probably you and I both felt that scene in a certain way. So I think the best thing to do is talk about those economic issues. So pipe fitters, they actually care about their family. I think it's embracing healthy masculinity again, and I think literally it's just going to take time doing that. I think it's going to take time. It's not going to be 1 year, like I said. It's not going to be a couple of photos of Tim Walz hunting. Even though I'm glad they did that, it's going to take a number of years to do that.
Okay, so. How many elections were you in for the House?
I did 12 years, so I guess 6.
6, okay. So if somebody out there wants to run for the United States House of Representatives or some other office, what advice would you give them? Like, what are the steps, like first step, second step, third step? I'd imagine a lot of them have to do with money.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's unfortunately, yes. And by the way, we need campaign finance reform. I know you guys agree, but it's insane. Yeah. Yeah, the first thing is obviously, I think, clear to yourself why you're doing this. Every one of you up here articulated your reason why, and none of you said that it was because you wanted to be a person with that job. It was you had something that compelled you to it. So I think it's make that clear. Understand the sacrifice it's going to take, and be willing to take it, because when you get in the battle, the one thing you don't want to do is, all of a sudden quit, right? The other thing is, get used to being able to ask people for money. It's kind of not fun, but at the same time, if you believe in the product, you can sell it. But the biggest thing I'll say is this, and it's kind of more psychological, is make it clear to yourself that when the tough decision comes, you're going to do the right thing. Because listen, everybody gets elected, particularly I can speak in the House of Representatives. They fantasize that someday they're going to be Mr. Smith goes to Washington, they're going to stand on the floor, say something that nobody else agrees with, but it's right, and they're going to go out in a blaze of glory. 99% of people would never actually do that end up getting elected, right? They think they would, but they wouldn't. Make it clear to yourself, even if it's not an office, just any job, anywhere. All of you in here at some point have had to stand up for something you believe morally. You've had to make that choice. Make that clear for yourself that you'll do that. And I think then, lastly, when you go out and you speak to people, don't read talking points. Just say what you think and what you believe. And you may screw it up, but I think America just wants genuine people now. They don't want you to stand up programs anymore.
Okay, one more question. What do you think about the Secretary of Defense?
Listen, I wish he was here to see this. I actually know Pete Hegseth. I guess I would say I was not friends, but acquaintances with him before actually he went to Fox News. So he used to put out like a newsletter. He was in Afghanistan and very serious stuff, and he ran for Senate in Minnesota and lost, and then he went to Fox News and got the Mar-a-Lago disease, where he changed the way his face and hair look, and cakes on makeup, and became an entertainer. The guy is the most unqualified person to ever sit in the Secretary of Defense. I mean, it's like, I was talking about the Iran situation, and I'm like, I'm still on Team America. I'm rooting for us, but I wish we had a different leadership team. I'd feel much more comfortable, as you all would. This is a guy that, by the way, sent in his signal chat that Europe needs to do more to defend the seas. Well, listen. The United States of America created the post-World War II order, and we didn't do it out of the goodness of our heart. We did it because it's really good for us, and it happens to be really good for the world too, right? This is not something... So when Pete Hegseth says Europe's not even protecting the seas, and by the way, at that exact moment, the French and British were there doing the exact same mission we were doing, we told the Europeans, we've told the world, we, the United States Navy, will be the defender of the seas. Don't worry about it, because that is the U.S. Navy's job. Why? Because now we get priority through the Suez Canal, through the Panama Canal. We get to write the rules of trade. We get to write the sea zones. And so to then turn around and say to our allies they're not doing enough is somebody that doesn't understand really basic things. So I wish he wasn't there. I don't know how long he'll last, and we'll have to see. But since that's the last question, I'll also say, I just want to say, particularly to all the folks in elected office up here, thank you for what you guys do and have done, and keep doing it, because that's really where the rubber meets the road. And to all of you, this is encouraging. We're only 6 months into the first presidential term. Usually, you'd never turn out a crowd like this. Now we have. Be encouraged, and I wish I could stay and take pictures with everybody. I got to drive back to Houston, but it's been wonderful to be here with you guys, so thank you so much.